I call the honourable member Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. National, of course, has a plan, and it is the right plan for these very hard economic times. We are determined to build a more competitive economy that will grow and support real jobs, provide higher incomes and assure New Zealanders that we are paying our way in the world and holding our own. Yes, the budget that we deliver in about 3 weeks' time will be a zero budget, the second that we have delivered, and we are doing that not because we have any problem with our plan, but because we have the courage, determination and tenacity to take the hard decisions, unlike Labor, of course. In all of the good financial years when they were presiding, there were problems with our deficit.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, it's a long hill Speaker's ruling that one does not question the courage of individuals or parties in the House in the way that that member just did.
Thank you. I have to say I missed that, but if a member referred to courage, that is out of order. I call the member to order and continue your speech.
The lack of tenacity and determination that Labor showed in their 9 years in government is something that New Zealand could not sustain. Let's look at their failed record. Spending like sailors, the public service grew into morbid obesity that we're trying to bring back in control. Cullen spent an extra $3 billion every year for the last 5 years they were in office. Flogging off state assets, of course, is something they know a great deal about. Some of the people that are in the opposition benches weren't around in the 80s, but day after day, in my former role in the media, they came into the studios, they talked about flogging off the family silver to pay for the groceries. They had to. They sneaked in a very broad-ranging plan that New Zealanders were not in any way expecting. They sold off everything lock, stock and barrel. When we look at the mixed ownership model, which we are doing very closely now, we have learned from their mistakes. We are looking at a prudent control of these assets. We will retain the 51% control. We will raise enough money so that we don't need to borrow to invest to keep our health and education at the world-class standard that it is now. We will be open about it, and that's why we signalled it nearly a year out from the election. We do have a mandate. The people of New Zealand knew what we were doing, and they continue to support what we will enact. So as far as our policies and reforms are concerned, let's look at some of the things that will be coming up in the next 3 weeks. We heard today, in response to a question I asked of the Minister of Finance in the House about the intention to strengthen the Public Finance Act 1989. It's going to be looking at limiting spending. This is something, of course, that the people on the other side of the House don't know a great deal about. But it is about a cap on spending, transparency, so that when a government is thinking of spending like sailors, increasing taxes and so forth, there will be restrictions on that. We are going to move away from excessive public spending, and this government has a determination to do that. The opposition claims that our economy is going backwards. Let's look at this in an international context. The UK is back in recession. We have a collapse of the Dutch economy. If we followed the failed policies of the people on the other side of the House, we would continue to borrow, we would continue to spiral downwards into debt, and we would continue to fund things that we really can't afford. Paid parental leave, well, it's a pretty good sort of an idea on some levels if you are completely flush, but we are not, and it is not the sort of policy that we would ever support. We need to grow the economy. We need to also look at ways of restricting the amount of spending that we're putting on things. The Prime Minister signalled the other day that we were going to do some fine-tuning over student loans in our budget. We remain, of course, absolutely committed to keeping them free, but we are determined to reduce the cost of the overall loan scheme to the taxpayer. This is the prudent thing to do. So the scheme is very large. Not that long ago, the government was effectively writing off some 49 cents of every dollar that was lent. With previous changes we've made, we brought that back down to 45 cents. And we intend to get it a bit closer to 40 cents in the future by continuing to chase the overseas borrowers, the people that have left the country and they think perhaps have left their responsibilities behind. If we give them the benefit of the doubt, it may be that they feel that they're away and they'll get to it in due course. But in the meantime, the country has an enormous debt around this that needs to be addressed. So we will get it closer to the 40 cents and there needs to be a faster repayment of those loans. Ultimately, of course, it's so much better for the person who's borrowed the money. They're getting rid of that monkey on their back earlier than they perhaps thought they would. Younger people perhaps tend to think they can put things off forever and a day, but that is not the case. And so by then speeding up, for example, the process of repayment, not to an unaffordable level, but something that has more momentum than it does currently with many of the borrowers, then that is going to be an excellent thing for the New Zealand economy. This government is about personal responsibility. People stepping up to the plate and saying, yes, I borrowed, yes, I'll pay it back. I have an individual choice and I will exercise it, but I will deliver on what I say I will do. There is no sense for me to see people going overseas and not actually continuing to pay back their debts. I think that it is very important that we all take responsibility for these things. The cradle to the grave dependency, the constant handouts that not everyone needs actually. This government is focused on putting the money where it needs to be focused. We target it to those in need. So we give them the hand up and not the handout. These are things that are philosophically not terribly much in keeping with some of the rowdier brayers on the other side of the house. But I would have to say that we have a plan and it is the right one, and that's why we were elected and others were not, I assume. The people of New Zealand are not silly. They recognise the failed policies of 9 years of Labour did them no good. They bear with us in the hard decisions that have to be made because they know that we have to get back on track. Who can afford to run their houses in the way that Labour used to run the country? If you haven't got the money, you don't spend it. You don't keep borrowing everything up to the max because it is people don't keep borrowing up to the max. Not you, the Speaker, of course. I'm sure that you're fiscally prudent in all ways, as I would wish that all New Zealanders were, because that effectively is what we're asking people to do, to be more prudent, to accept that there has been overspending and there has been an amount of money allocated to things that actually doesn't need to be there. So we do need to tighten up. We're doing that in the public service and we're doing that in a raft of other measures. I think that this government, with Budget 2012, is going to signal very strongly to the voters of New Zealand that we are determined to get the books back on target and in surplus. I think a zero budget is an act of courage. I remember back to the days when people feared the budget. They'd go out and fill up their cars and buy their beer and baccy if they were their poisons, and they would brace themselves for a budget that was going to sting them. Ours is going to be a budget that will be fair, but will also continue the message that we have been sending since the start of the campaign, that we actually do need to watch what we're spending. When we look at campaigning and we look at the solutions, because there has been a paucity and a scarcity of them coming from the opposition benches, what exactly is their plan? OK, GST of vegetables and fruit, that'll get dropped. It wasn't a particularly vote-winning idea. $5,000 tax-free, the first $5,000, is that gone yet? It was never going to fly really anyway, was it? These are the sort of things that are not going to serve anyone well. The capital gains tax, if I recall correctly, when it was announced on the campaign trail, Labour's popularity went down by about 6 points overnight. Not popular with their own people, not something that we would have brought in. New Zealanders, as I said, are too smart to fall for these tricks. They know that we're in trouble. They know that the world economies are in trouble. That we do not want to end up in a situation where we are defaulting. We do not want to lose the standard of living that we have, and we do not want to see our young people leaving in droves. We need to make this a strong, focused economy that will keep our young people here, that will grow jobs, and that will use smarter measures to actually do what we need to do. I am a member of the Blue-Green Group, the National Advisory Group on Conservation and Environmental Matters, and I think that, and I am someone who has a lifelong passion for flora and fauna in this country. They need protecting. We haven't got much money at the moment, so what do? Do we shelve all of our conservation projects? Indeed not. What we do is we look for smarter ways to fund important projects. A couple of days ago, the new Tourism Conservation Partnership was announced. What a fantastic idea to get... Kate Wilkinson has negotiated a deal with Air New Zealand so that the two will work together to promote our flora and fauna. We will, under the Air New Zealand arrangement, be able to fly our endangered species to new breeding sites around the country and to invest directly in conservation programs along the Great Walks. These are great things to do. Tourism and conservation They go hand in hand. This country absolutely is defined by its land, its people, but we need to look at the things that have been successful. They haven't cost money. We didn't borrow millions of dollars from offshore as others have done and would continue to do. We are indeed approaching businesses and asking them to help out. With the Kakapo, for example, we've got the aluminium smelters and Forest and Bird all involved in that. So people are working collectively in partnerships to get the best outcome. The $1 Million Mouse campaign, as it's known. We have a big businessman joining forces with the Conservation Department, Gareth Morgan, and the department trying to get to the point where we are saving an endangered species. These are the sort of initiatives, thinking smarter, that this government is doing and very proud to do, and I'm very proud to be part of it. I'm proud of the policies that we put forward, and I'm looking forward to the budget in 3 weeks' time. Thank you.
The question is that the motion